Hello, and welcome to our presentation of To Stay or Not to Stay. We are the Minions. I'm Cadet Wesley Anywhere. With me are Cadet Michael Greer, Cadet Clayton Morehouse, and Cadet Ronald Taylor. We will be hitting all of these elements throughout our presentation, going through the framing elements of the decision problem, several of our structure values and the frameworks, finally moving into the decision tree, sensitivity analyses, and our final recommendation. So the purpose of this problem is that we have a friend who has asked us, knowing that we are cadets partaking in SC 385 decision analysis, to help him determine whether he should stay in the Army or get out. We will be providing an impartial opinion in order to help him understand what his options are and how his values should impact his decision based on various percentages that he has granted us. The objectives that we will be considering are his professional satisfaction, his quality of life, costs of traveling, and finally, his future market value. Some of the decisions that he has are to stay in or get out. Once he decides on that, he will then either have to pick if he wants to remain in the infantry or possibly submit a packet to become a field area officer, FAO. If he decides to leave, he will have options between going for an interview with MUG's metadata or DAB's data farms. Once he does that, some of the uncertainties he will have to face are the posting within infantry, of which he has a few options of Germany, the 101st or 82nd, or another CONUS option, his FAO selection and the possible FAO postings he may have, the probability of interviewing well, or other civilian jobs that may be available. Finally, again, these are the values that he will be having to weigh.
So in our value hierarchy, we have cost of travel, quality of life, future market value, and professional satisfaction. We want to minimize the cost of travel, and then we want to maximize the quality of life, maximize future market salary, and then maximize job satisfaction. These are our weights for each of these values that we just use algebra to determine, and then we will use in our decision model.
So to go in depth on the decision tree, our first decision, as Wes mentioned before, is whether we want to stay in the Army or leave. Once we make that decision, that leaves us with two decisions. I'm first going to go through the MUG metadata or the data farm. So if we choose to get out the Army, we can choose between which company we want to interview with. Based on that decision, there's a certain uncertainty on how well we will interview with that company, and depending on the interview quality of that will impact whether we get the job or not. There is a probability that we can still get the job based on our interview quality, even if it's bad. But if it's bad and we don't get the job, then we have another opportunity with Lanus Lamis company or becoming a contractor. To go to the next decision, which is whether we chose to stay in the Army, we would then have to choose between being a FAO officer or staying in the infantry. The more simple one, which is staying in the infantry, would take us to an uncertainty of infantry posts, which is between Germany, 101st or 82nd, and then other CONUS spots. But if we choose to take the more difficult route, which is the FAO selection, we do have to now depend on the uncertainty of being selected for FAO or not being selected for FAO. If we're not selected, then the outcome of getting those previously mentioned infantry posts also decrease. But if we do get selected, then we also have to choose which type of FAO officer we want to be, embassy or major command staff officer, which then leads to further uncertainties on where we will be posted for those positions. As previously mentioned by my partners, our four calculations: quality of life, professional satisfaction, cost of traveling, and future market values. So we determined that our first decision of staying in the Army or leaving goes into all four of these, as well as the decisions of MUG metadata or DAB's data farms or FAO or infantry. Those also affect all four. Do y'all want to add anything?
Awesome. So this is the top half of our decision tree. It reflects our decision to stay in the Army. So if we decide to stay in the Army, this is where it branches off into the FAO and the infantry. And then this reflects what Ronald was saying about the infantry, where we have 50% chance of going to Germany, 30% chance of going to the 101st or the 82nd, and a 20% chance of going to another CONUS spot. With our FAO decision, there's a chance of being selected and not being selected. FAO selection is a 55% chance, and non-selection is a 45% chance. After FAO selection, now we have a choice between going to an embassy or major command staff assignment. And so this is going to be the posting assignments for embassies are Nairobi, Djibouti, and Juba. 30% chance or 30-30-40 odds for both chances after deciding embassy or major command staff. The different posting options for major command are, what is this again?
U.S. Army Euro.
Yeah, U.S. Army Euro, Joint Staff, and AFRICOM with 30-30-40 odds again. For the FAO non-selection, the odds of getting different posts change based on the choice to go infantry or FAO. So because of the selection process for FAO, the amount of time it takes to get that packet sent through and processed is going to decrease the odds of being able to go OCONUS and is going to increase odds for the 82nd and the 101st. On the far right is our total value for each alternative. So what we had to do was we had to interpolate the raw scores into values. The cost of travel and the future market value were both linear scales, and then the raw scores for quality of life and professional satisfaction were on a scale of 1 to 10, so we had to interpolate those values as well. And then once we converted those to values, we multiplied those values by the weight, added them all together to get the total value for each system. Next slide, please. This is the reflection of our choice to leave the Army. So once we decide to leave, then we get to choose between MUGS metadata and DABS data frames. After this, then we have all the uncertainties that follow each of those decisions. So interview quality, getting the job based off a bad interview, and then the probability of a Lanus Llama's job vacancy after not getting a job at either company. So when I built the decision model, I did not keep the total values right here to go to right here because they're both the same. And in the Excel sheet, these reference each other up here. So they have the same total value for each one. Next slide.
All right, so moving into the tornado diagram, you can see here that these uncertainties and decisions can become, they value and vary, and from the top has the biggest level of variation and impact on the expected value of the entire model, and then as you go down it has a less impact. And so as you can see, bad interview gets the DABS data farm job as the highest, and then becoming a FAO at Djibouti has the lowest of the 5.
So first, going into our one-way sensitivity analysis, first going over FAO selection. So the first part is our expected value in a node if we did infantry FAO. You can see that if the probability of FAO selection reaches 60%, we want to choose to pick FAO over infantry. And then on this strategy region, once the probability of FAO selection reaches 60%, we want to choose to stay in the Army because this is expected value of whether we leave or stay in the Army. But for this one, we get a better expected value of staying in the Army, and then that one is a better expected value for choose FAO over infantry.
Just a second. So this graph right here is basically showing us that at 60%, there's something that happens that determines that the value of staying in the Army shoots up. In this entire decision model, staying in the Army provides more value than leaving. And so this graph right here is showing us what is actually happening at that point right there that determines how that value shoots up like that.
And then for evaluating the variation of bad interviewing but still getting a job at DABS data farm, you can see that once we reach about 25% probability, we're more inclined to leave the Army with a higher expected value rather than stay in the Army.
This graph reflects the probability that we have a bad interview with MUGS metadata, but still get the job. In here, you can see that once you hit 60%, that's when the leaving the Army to go for the MUGS metadata interview skyrockets, with the odds that a bad interview will still land you a job with MUGS metadata.
So the two-way sensitivity analysis, we looked at the FMV of infantry and the cost of travel for Germany. And so as you can see here, to leave the army is the triangles, with the stay in the army being the diamonds. So bottom left corner, the minimum amount, or the minimum amount, of money to stay within the army is going to be $99,000. And then it's generally going to curve along here and eventually end there.
So our final consideration was that we had to find one more variable in order to provide a better outlook for our friend on what they might have to consider. And we chose to examine what the opening at Lane Islamas could look like and how that might affect their ability or their desire to stay or leave. And we again see that at about 60% of a success of a vacancy with Lane Islamas is when you would decide to leave and accept that job over staying in the army. Ultimately, we believe that it is best to stay in and go to the infantry. There's the least amount of uncertainty with this position, and it provides the highest total value on average for each uncertainty. Going into the ideas, we believe that there are certain factors that may limit our friend's ability in order to acquire those positions that he was looking for. That's why we were examining the FAO, his success with the interviews. Sir, class, pending any questions, this is the conclusion of our brief.